This is Radio Caravan, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. China took over the premises of the U.S. consulate in the southwestern city of Chengdu this morning after ordering the facility to be vacated in retaliation for China's ouster last week from its consulate in Houston. In more than 40 years since China and the United States established formal diplomatic relations, acquisitions have been traded, tensions have risen and fallen, and the two sides have come dangerously close to outright confrontation. The new coronavirus pandemic that has infected more than 16 million people is easily the world's global health emergency that the World Health Organization is facing, according to its director, who praised Canada, China, Germany and South Korea for controlling the outbreaks. Moderna Inc. has said this morning it has started a U.S. government-backed late-stage trial to assess its COVID-19 vaccine candidate in about 30,000 adults who do not have the respiratory illness caused by the new coronavirus. Florida has surpassed New York in its total number of coronavirus cases. California, of course, has the most of any state at 4,335,334. And the U.S. has confirmed more than 4 million coronavirus cases and nearly 150,000 deaths. And the daily fatalities continuously passing the 1,000 mark. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention officially announced that they've changed their COVID-19 guidance on how long patients need to self-isolate. People who have experienced mild to moderate COVID-19 can come out of isolation after 10 days. The new CDC guidelines added that the person does not need to be retested before going back to work after the isolation. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin were at the Capitol yesterday to put what Meadows described as final touches on a $1 trillion relief bill Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected to bring forward this afternoon. Larry Kudlow, Trump's top economic advisor, has said that the next round of coronavirus relief will include additional $1,200 checks to Americans as well as an extension of the federal eviction moratorium. Protests took a violent turn in several U.S. cities over the weekend, with demonstrators squaring off against federal agents outside a courthouse in Portland, Oregon, forcing police in Seattle to retreat into a station house and setting fire to vehicles in California and Virginia. A protest against police violence in Austin, Texas, turned deadly when police said a protester was shot and killed by a person who drove through a crowd of marchers. And as gun violence continues to plague Chicago, President Trump has announced that federal agents will be deployed to the city to help drive down violent crime. President Trump has also vowed that military bases named for Confederate leaders will not be changing, despite congressional momentum on the issue, another increase in tensions over the issue of Confederate symbolism in the military. Hannah, the first hurricane of the 2020 Atlantic season, left a trail of destruction along the Texas coast yesterday, downing power lines, toppling parts of the U.S.-Mexico border wall, and bringing torrential rains to the area. And Hurricane Douglas gained some strength and began to spin away from many of the Hawaiian islands as it skirted the state late yesterday. With 100 days until the election, Democrat Joe Biden holds a 5-point lead over President Trump in Arizona, with more voters saying the former vice president would do a better job handling the coronavirus pandemic and race relations. The world will be watching the U.S. presidential election on the 3rd of November, but just 24 hours later is another hugely consequential news event when the U.S. will formally leave the Paris Climate Agreement on the 4th of November. Germany has rejected a proposal by President Trump to invite Russian President Putin back into the group of 7 most advanced economies. And the United States this week accused Russia of having tested an anti-satellite weapon in space, a charge that Moscow has denied, saying the device was a special instrument for inspecting orbiting Russian equipment. Iran has moved a mock aircraft carrier to the strategic Strait of Hormuz amid heightened tensions between Tehran and the United States. And a leading international rights group today urged the UN Security Council to impose additional sanctions on Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels unless they provide UN experts access to an oil tanker moored off the coast of Yemen and in danger of leaking. The Palestinian Authority has said this morning that a group of Israeli settlers has tried to burn down a mosque near the West Bank city of Ramallah. And 2 anti-government protesters were killed and 21 injured in Baghdad in new clashes between demonstrators and Iraqi security forces. The Taliban accused Afghan security forces of re-arresting insurgents who had been released as part of a crucial prisoner swap meant to kickstart peace talks. Afghanistan, meanwhile, has seen a 13% drop in the number of civilians killed and wounded in violence across the country in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same period last year, according to a UN report released this morning. The Sudanese government is sending more troops to the rest of Darfur region following a spike in violence there. And Saudi Arabia will, the day after tomorrow, begin hosting the annual Hajj pilgrimage, dramatically downscaled due to the coronavirus pandemic that has barred millions of international pilgrims for the first time in modern history. Up to 10,000 people residing in the kingdom will participate in the Muslim ritual, a tiny fraction of the 2.5 million that attended last year, after what many saw as an opaque selection process that left a wave of applicants rejected. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. And Serbia will strengthen its armed forces and is seeking to purchase more warplanes amidst simmering tensions in the Balkans. Britain is closely watching rises in coronavirus cases in other European destinations such as France and Germany after slapping a 14-day quarantine on travellers from Spain at the height of the summer vacation season. England versus West Indies. The rain has delayed the start in Manchester this morning, and Stuart Broad took 6 wickets as England built a strong position in the deciding third test despite the West Indies avoiding the follow-on at Old Trafford yesterday. North Korean authorities have imposed a lockdown on the border city of Kaesong after discovering what they say is the country's first suspected coronavirus case. Leader Kim Jong-un convened an emergency Politburo meeting to implement a maximum emergency system and issue a top-class alert. Hundreds of Thai gay activists have raised rainbow flags in Bangkok during a pro-democracy rally in the capital. They danced and sang in the city centre where police were deployed, but there were no reports of any violence. Police in New South Wales, Australia, won a Supreme Court case to stop a Black Lives Matter protest from taking place tomorrow due to the coronavirus concerns. And China recording 61 new coronavirus cases today, the highest daily figure since April, propelled by clusters in 3 separate regions that have sparked fears of a fresh wave. With the Chinese People's Liberation Army deploying close to 50,000 troops in Aksai Chin, the Indian Army for the first time has deployed a squadron of 12 T-90 missile-firing tanks, armoured personnel carriers and a full troop brigade at Daulat Beg Oldi to prevent any Chinese aggression from the Shaksgam Karakoram Pass axis. And the first batch of 5 Rafale jets took off from France for India today. The multi-role fighter aircraft scheduled to arrive at the Ambala Air Force Station the day after tomorrow, nearly 4 years after India signed an intergovernment agreement with France to procure these 36 Rafale jets for the Indian Air Force. Reliance Industries, controlled by Asia's richest man, has toppled ExxonMobil Corporation to become the world's largest energy company after Saudi Aramco, as investors piled into the conglomerate lured by the Indian firm's digital and retail forays. And the government in India has banned 47 more Chinese apps, which are apparently clones of the 59 applications which were banned earlier. With a record single-day jump of almost 50,000 COVID-19 cases, India's caseload has climbed and the country's death toll risen to 32,771, with 708 fatalities being recorded in one day. India has recorded the highest single-day testing of over 5.15 lakh tests to diagnose COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The latest surveillance reports from Delhi showed that nearly a quarter of Delhi's population may already have battled the deadly COVID-19 infection in one way or the other. The Delhi Jal Board said that due to increase in ammonia levels in raw water discharged from Haryana, the water supply will be affected in parts of West, North, Central and South Delhi, including the Delhi cantonment. And days ahead of the end of COVID-19 lockdown in Maharashtra at the end of the month, the state government has started brainstorming about relaxations to be introduced from the first week of August. Parts of Mumbai, including Dadar, face severe waterlogging this morning following heavy rainfall in the region, and the Rajasthan Assembly Speaker withdrew his plea in the Supreme Court against the High Court order which had directed him to defer his decision on disqualification notices issued to former Deputy Chief Minister Sachin Pilot and 18 other MLAs. The decks to host the IPL in the UAE have been cleared from the BCCI's side, according to the Emirates Cricket Board, confirming this morning. And Pakistan cricket will be facing the real impact of COVID-19 in its remaining cricket season starting in September, which include holding of unfinished Pakistan Super League 5 games as well as hosting Zimbabwe and the Bangladesh teams. The incoming president of the United Nations General Assembly has announced that he was postponing his visit to Pakistan. And the Punjab government has decided to enforce a smart lockdown in the days of the Eid holidays, as the confirmed cases in Pakistan 274,289 and the deaths at 5,842. Reeling under the recent dubious flying license controversy, a special cabinet meeting will be held tomorrow to finalize a government plan to set up two separate authorities. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the news for you this morning.